Um, right. Thank you very much, all of you who managed to get here on time. There are a whole lot of others who hopefully will join you at some point because we booked up the entire room. And in Cape Town, there's an even more crowded venue, or at least it will be crowded. I'm Irwin Manoim. I'm the chair of the Jewish Democratic Initiative, and I've been asked to explain briefly, but not that briefly, what this is all about. So a few weeks back, I was sitting at Kleinsky's, sipping on my cappuccino while half reading a book. And actually, I was half snooping in on other people's private conversations, which is the kind of thing I do in restaurants. At the table to my right were two balding Yidlach of my own vintage who had ordered the salmon bagels with cream cheese. And on my left were two blonde and Botox shiksas who'd ordered scrambled eggs with bacon. At the table to the right, the talk began with the usual humdrum yada yada about cricket, golf, rugby, sprained knees. But my ears went into overdrive when they turned to the safety of the Jews. People were scared, they agreed. University students were being harassed. Hamas terrorists were marching down the Sea Point prom. Philip Kravitz needs 24-hour bodyguards. Ramaphosa gets his dirty money under the table from Iran. Jews have not a friend in the world, not the anti-Semitic BBC, not the anti-Semitic CNN, not the anti-Semitic United Nations, not the anti-Semitic British Labour Party. But as our chief rabbi said, thank goodness for Trump. He might seem a bit of a clown now and then, but he was 100% behind Bibi. And Bibi was teaching those Iranians one hell of a lesson they would not forget. At the table to my left, the talk began with the usual humdrum, yada yada, hairdressers, children, Pilates, sprained knees. But my ears went into overdrive when they zoned in on a Jewish friend from way back by the name of Mandy. Seems Mandy had been a great liberal in her day. Progressive Party fate, Helen Suzman, money for the poor, taught English part-time to township kids, had a gay daughter with a black partner whom she did not disown. Then one day recently came an unexpected fallout between the friends. The two blondes had by the by expressed shock at the carnage being visited upon Palestinian civilians in Gaza. And they imagined that as a card-carrying liberal, Mandy would agree. But no, what the hell, they said. Mandy instead had a hissy fit. Oh, she said, so you don't even care about the Jews who were massacred on October the 7th? And she had not spoken to either of them since. Now, did I mention that I was not only snooping, I was also reading a book? Actually, I was reading it under the table, just out of prudence in case someone noticed. And that's because the book I was reading was Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza by Peter Baynard. And I'd reached the part where he describes visiting his grandparents in Cape Town during the apartheid era. How he, as a little boy, listened to the grown-ups talk about the white people who had been killed in terrorist attacks, how the whole world had turned against South Africa with vicious sanctions. But, said the grown-ups around him, sensible people must stand together because only the toughest measures can prevent the terrorists from murdering us in our beds or driving us into the sea. But then, points out Baynard, suddenly more or less out of nowhere, came negotiations. Nelson Mandela morphed from a blood-soaked terrorist into a sage. The negotiations were by no means easy. They stopped and started. There was bloodshed and more bloodshed, but the talks persisted for 4 years. And finally, a settlement was reached. The society South Africa has today is far from perfect, and there are no end of complaints about potholes and load shedding and corruption, and perhaps more significant, the failure to redress inequality. But people who were previously labeled white or non-white may today live and work and play shoulder to shoulder, sit on the same park benches, eat in the same restaurants, swim on the same beaches, marry one another, attend the same schools and universities, and there are no bombs, no stone throwing, no thousands of political prisoners, no Caspers shooting civilians in the townships. But points out Peter Baynard, in the very same period the negotiations were happening in South Africa, they were happening in Israel. They were still at an early tentative stage. There was hostility to the process from violent extremists on both sides, but it was making progress. It looked promising. People who claimed to be in the know said, those smart, big-brained Jews, they'll figure this out long before the Afrikaners. And then an assassin's bullet put an end to all of that. And we'll never know where the talks might have led. The prime minister who replaced the murdered Yitzhak Rabin was Bibi Netanyahu. And 30 years later, Israel is further from any remote possibility of a peace deal than it has ever been. And the carnage has reached proportions unimaginable just 661 days ago. And what do Jews talk about now? How the whole world has turned against us, how we must stand firm because only the toughest measures can prevent Hamas from driving all the Jews into the sea. Now, Peter Baynard expended a good few pages explaining all of this to Americans, but we white South Africans, or at least some of us white South Africans, know from our own lived experience that we learnt something of a humbling lesson from the collapse of the apartheid era. We learnt that we needed to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, we were wrong. We were wrong for all those years, but we were unable to see we were wrong because we were always in denial. And this denial was our form of self-protection. We could look up, we could look down, we could look sideways, but we could not look straight ahead at the reality right in front of us. We could live 5 minutes from a township and know nothing of what happened inside. And whenever we were asked about apartheid, we also always had a string of excuses. But today, it's the Jewish community who are in denial. The Jewish community are in denial because we are scared. We have never been more scared. October the 7th has been our recurring nightmare, a night and day of horror that keeps looping around and round in our imaginations, reminding us that if we thought we were safe in our fortresses, we were mistaken. The more scared we are, the more we lose our bearings, the more we lose touch with basic humanity, the more we are unable to grasp the monsters we have become. So here, for example, is the opinion of Avram Berg. If that is a name that rings no bells, let me explain. He was the boss of the World Zionist Organization and then the boss of the Jewish Agency. He was president of Israel for a little while, and he was Speaker of the Knesset for somewhat longer. And this is what he says now. Few nations on earth suffer from a denial syndrome as deep as Israel's. A denial of reality, facts, morality, empathy, and practical responsibility. The examples are all too familiar. There is no settler violence. There is no occupation. The occupation is necessary for security. They started it. There's no one to talk to. I don't know what's happening there. It's just a fringe group. It's no wonder that the most denial-ridden state in the world also clings to a blind and dishonest belief in the so-called most moral army in the world, when in truth, it ranks among the least moral armies of our time alongside those of Russia and Ethiopia. We chant that we are the only democracy in the Middle East, while the truth is we are at best only half a democracy. It is time to lift the curtain and shout the truth out aloud and without hesitation. You are living a lie. You are electing liars and complicit in the deception. Enough already. And in that, Berg sums up the reason for this festival of dangerous ideas. We, the Jewish people, need the courage to get past our own denial. We need to stop making excuses and summons the courage to say, we are wrong. We are terribly, terribly wrong. This war, which could have been ended long ago, has achieved nothing in 660 days, not the rescue of the hostages, not the elimination of Hamas, not only the most certain planting of new hatreds in the hearts of those Palestinians who have watched their homes go up in smoke, their mothers and fathers, uncles, aunts, and children die, and who are right now enduring starvation and dispossession. Now, for those of you who attended the movie last night, discussion moved on to what can we diaspora Jews do? And that is by no means clear. But what is clear is that first we need to understand, how did this country, this refuge of the Jewish people that we were all brought up to admire, how did it all go so wrong? And that is the purpose of this festival of dangerous ideas. That these ideas are in any way dangerous is, of course, absurd. They are sensible ideas, they are peacemaking ideas, but they are such dangerous ideas that Jewish Report attached a rare disclaimer to our advertising. It said, the views expressed in this advert do not necessarily reflect the views of SA Jewish Report. Now, despite this emphatic non-endorsement from the leading Jewish publication, the response to this festival has exceeded our wildest ambitions. In Cape Town, we've had to adjust the venue 3 times over to fit the crowd. And in total with Johannesburg, we have 250 people who've registered, which is about 3 times what we expected, suggesting that there are cracks appearing in their community. Now, the speakers with dangerous ideas that we have assembled here include some rather famous names from the international Jewish world, who range across the spectrum, deliberately so, from the former chair of the Conservative Party in Britain, to liberal two-staters, to self-described anti-Zionist, to a Palestinian journalist coming from a very different angle. But what they do all have in common is a commitment to humanity on both the Jewish and Palestinian sides, and to an idea of democracy, which means equality for all, not votes for some. And they do not for 1 minute believe that this war is being fought for reasons other than the cynical self-preservation of the worst government Israel has ever experienced. The original idea was that the speakers would fly out to be with us, and invitations were extended to 3 of the speakers. But then came the Iran war, which prevented serious work being done in Israel for a fortnight. And this threw out schedules. As a result, 2 of the Israeli speakers were obliged to say, sorry, we won't be able to come after all. But they'll nonetheless still be with us over Zoom. We are, however, grateful that one of the 3, Hanin Majadli, a columnist at Haaretz and editor of the Arab edition, will be with us this afternoon in Johannesburg, and tomorrow she will fly to Cape Town. So the way this conference is going to proceed is each speaker will appear on the big screen simultaneously in Johannesburg and Cape Town. Hanin will be here in Johannesburg, and Caitlin Leroy, a human rights lawyer, will be in Cape Town, but both will appear on the screen on the other side. It's been structured so there will be plenty of time for people in the audience at either venue to ask questions. which will appear on the screen at the other side. Each session will be chaired by my colleague Anton Harbour, who here in Johannesburg, and Sally Frankenthal, who will be backing him up in Cape Town. There are lunches and teas at both venues. Photographs by the news photographer Maya Levine will be displayed on screens at both venues. As a break from the speakers, there will be interactive workshops, one in Cape Town, one in Johannesburg, in which you'll be asked to remember when Israel and Zionism first became meaningful in your life, and also, should this apply, when you started having doubts. Big question, will the sessions be uploaded to YouTube? Well, it's a thorny topic. There are people in the audience who hesitated long and hard before committing to be here. Their anxiety is that they have colleagues and friends and relatives firmly entrenched in the other camp of denial. So out of respect to these shy people among us, the cameras will never focus on the audience. Likewise, the speakers themselves may perhaps not wish that their sessions be uploaded to YouTube. We will only upload them with their definite permission. 2 further rules of engagement. For the same reasons, please do not photograph or record any of the sessions yourself. And if you see anyone recording sessions, please alert the organizers. But a proviso, if you choose to ask a question so that you can be seen on the screen on the other side, you'll have to come up here to the microphone, or likewise in Cape Town, so that your question can be relayed to the other venue, in which case, by asking a question, you will have basically unmasked yourself, and we assume that if you want to ask a question, you will have agreed to be identified. There will be different opinions expressed here, sometimes about contentious issues. We hope you'll respect the notion that other people have different ideas to you, and that they ought to listen or speak respectfully. I think that last night's sessions went very well under those circumstances, and I hope that carries on. Finally, our thanks to all the speakers for generously giving their time and their expertise to speak to this rather little corner of the Jewish world. Our thanks to all of you for booking to be with us. Our thanks in Johannesburg to the Nelson Mandela Foundation for hosting us here in Johannesburg and for the support and assistance they've provided. And our thanks to all those volunteers in both cities who kindly helped with the organization. And with that, are we ready to begin?
Yeah.